Hello, hello! Desolator Magic here, back with another great video. This time we're going to cover a budget standard deck, and it is pretty, I'd say OGW heavy and at least BFZ heavy. I'm not sure any of the cards really come from any set outside of that other than the lands. So, I love new concepts, I love new decks, and of course I love budget decks. They don't cost very much. There is one card in there that costs a fortune, and it's definitely swap-outable. It's actually the least useful card in the whole deck in my opinion, but I put it in there because it's just so utterly powerful. But feel free to take it out. If you take it out, this is probably about a $15 to $20 deck, but it will beat absolutely everybody under the right conditions. The reason that I built this deck is because whenever I play against something like this, I have trouble beating it because there's just no way to stop it. There's really only one weakness, and nobody is playing that right now, so theoretically it has no exploitable weakness. Now, as you may have noticed, I do typically give my deck some silly name that's either a play on words or a joke, or it's ironic based on what it does, or something like that, something clever. This time around, nothing really came to mind, so we're just going to call it my Black-White Vampire Ally deck, because that's what it is. If you do have a better name idea after you see this deck, please leave it in the comment section, because I'll take the first one that sounds better than this, which is pretty much anything. So let's start with the only non-creature in the deck. It is the Retreat to Hagra, and I have exactly 3 of them in there. This is sort of questionable, but I really like the fact that the triggers come from everywhere, so the opponent just cannot stop what you're doing. It's all about draining away their life 1 point at a time. So this is on land drops, which like literally cannot be countered within the rules. I guess it's not a respondable action, or however they describe that. So really the second effect is what you're looking for. The opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, which is all that this deck does. So there's also Evolving Wilds in the deck, so you could spring Evolving Wilds on their turn, use the first effect, grant a creature Death Touch, and then chump block, and kill their giant creature that they're swinging with, and most people just don't realize that that combo is sitting on the field right in front of them. You'd be surprised. So other than that, it's a pretty straightforward card. You drop it a land, they lose a life, you gain 1. Yeehaw. Now, let's start with the creatures. Zulaport Cutthroat, my favorite. I absolutely love this card because whenever another creature dies, or Zulaport itself, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I bet you can see what this deck does. Next up, we've got the Cliffhaven Vampire. This guy really is the key. Oh, did I mention Zulaport? There's 4 of them because he's freaking amazing. Cliffhaven, there's only 3 of, though, in the deck. He's flying. He's a 2/4, so not a lot of damage. He costs 4, which is really expensive for this deck, but whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. That is per instance, so keep that in mind. Next up, we've got Drana's Emissary, another really good 2/2 flyer. A lot of flyers in this deck, which is an unexpected bonus. You don't see that a lot with decks that are, single-purpose gimmicks, like +1/-1. Speaking of that, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that's just during their upkeep. They can't cast negate on that. So unless they can just wipe out all your creatures plus retreat and stop you from dropping lands, they're just going to get hit over and over and over without your creatures technically having to get through or do anything. So I definitely put 4 of the Drana's Emissary in there because they're one of the strongest and they have a really good mana cost for what they do. They can also swing in the air and do tons of damage. I mean, it's just fantastic. And next up, we've got Ayli, Eternal Pilgrim. The only problem with her is that she is not an ally. Now you notice that the last 3 cards that I mentioned all were allies. They do trigger rally, which is very, very important. But if you look at what she does, it's just unreal. She's a 2/3 with Death Touch, so a Death Toucher with higher toughness than their attack, which is the best type of Death Toucher. She has higher stats than her mana cost, which is very rare. She is legendary, so you gotta watch out for that, but if you pay 1 colorless and you don't even have to tap her, you can sacrifice another creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. So if they're about to blow up a creature, or you're forced to chump block with it, or something's about to happen to that creature, you could just sacrifice it for 1 of any color. You don't have to color fix it. And you're all set. You just gain life equal to its toughness. And there's a lot of really high toughness creatures in this deck. I guess relatively high. There's no 0/6s. Unless you did want to throw on that 1/0/6, which was in the original deck idea. But I need aggro. I need to kill the other team very quickly. The other opponent, not team. This could take out a whole team, actually. Most of the effects say each opponent, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now, her second ability is very interesting. I wouldn't count on it, but if you do get it off, it's just obscenely powerful. So for 1 colorless, 1 white, 1 black, you can sacrifice another creature that you own. So that's unfortunate because they're all really important. Like, you wouldn't want to get rid of Drana's Emissary. But activate this ability only if you have at least 10 life above your starting life total. So you gotta have at least 30, which is actually very doable in this deck. And the effect is you exile target non-land permanent. So you get rid of anything off their side other than a land. That is so powerful, and it's repeatable. You could actually cast it twice in 1 turn, and it's not like it blows up Ayli. She's still there. So that's just fantastic. I mean, I've gotten to do that, I think, once in a game, but it was just devastating. It ended it. I basically got rid of their only flyer and then just kept swinging with flyers. So next up, we've got the best ally in white, basically. It's a 2-1 for 1. That's it. Believe it or not, pretty much the best ally. Because if you were to scale it up to 2 mana, well, is there one that's a 4-2 for 2? No. So, hey, 2-1 for 1. Very, very nice. And then they trigger rally. So, and then this is the sacrifice target if I absolutely need to. But usually it's because I'm chump blocking with it first or something. So, Ayli, there's 3 of in the deck. I keep forgetting to say this. And as for Expedition Envoy, there's 3 as well, because it just isn't that important. It's not that high of aggro. It's not flying. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Ondu War Cleric, which I am strongly considering swapping out for Makindi Patrol, because that's Rally Vigilance, and this guy, all he does is tap an untapped ally you control, even if that ally has Summoning Sickness, by the way, and you gain 2 life. So that was supposed to work with another card that's no longer in the deck. Or I should say, Makindi Patrol didn't work with a card that wasn't in the deck. So Makindi is definitely a little more expensive, but Vigilance is just huge. I mean, if you can swing and then sit on defense, that's just fantastic, especially with all the death touch, chump blocking, all that stuff. So Ondu or Makindi both have only 3 in the deck. Next up, we've got the turbo expensive cards, about $10 a copy. Drana, Liberator of Malakir. She is kind of the leader of the storyline, leader of Malakir, I guess. I don't know, I didn't really read it. And she's flying in first strike, which is pretty good for a 2-3. And then here's where it gets really interesting. It is double black, so it's really hard to get her out. 2 damage in the air isn't very good. She's already legendary, which is why I dropped it down to 3 in the deck. But whenever Drana, Liberator of Malakir, deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control, including herself. Here's the fun thing. You do first strike damage, put a counter on every attacking creature, then resolve, I guess, second strike damage, as I always incorrectly call it. So you basically resolve the remainder of combat. So everybody gets a counter during first strike phase, because that's combat damage to the player, assuming that she's hitting the player. So keep that in mind. Usually I'm not a complete dick and spring it on people. Usually I'll tell them ahead of time, hey, by the way, all my creatures are going to be 1 bigger, or I get that face when I tell them, oh yeah, all my creatures are 1 bigger and everything you blocked with died and your whole blocking assignment sucks. So depending upon how aggressive you want to be, you could spring that on them. Then next up, we've got 3 copies of Kalastria Healer. I absolutely love this creature. In fact, it really could be bumped up to 4. It's just that it's a 1-2 for 2, and this is sort of like a high damage deck, but you could consider it a defensive stall deck. Either way, 1-2 on the ground is not that good. But what is good is that whenever this creature itself or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So you mix it with Zulaport, they enter the battlefield +1/-1, then they die +1/-1. Absolutely fantastic. I love that creature, and I'm very, very glad that they printed it as a common. Now we've got some serious offense coming in the ultra important, and thus 4 copies of in the deck, Lantern Scout. It has the best rally effect really in the whole game, although there is a double strike one, I think, so that's kind of tied, but double strike and lifelink are about the same, so that's what this one does. It's a 3-2 for 3, so a little bit expensive, but it is an ally, and it is not legendary. Finally. Plus, I need more white creatures in there anyway. So, whenever Lantern Scout itself or an ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Now, remember how that other creature, Cliffhaven Vampire, said whenever you gain life, that's per hit per instance. So, if 4 creatures swung at them and you gained life 4 different times from 4 different lifelinks, then his trigger would go off 4 times, and they'd lose another additional 4 life, which would be fantastic. Next up, we've got the fixer for the deck that should have been in the first design of it and wasn't. Oops. It's pretty much the big ol' what do they call that? I forgot the term. But whenever you're playing a deck with a whole bunch of the same type of creature, like allies, for example, this is what you want in there. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it, and that only qualifies once. All it has to do is yes or no on the does it share. So if it's both a vampire and an ally, you don't get +2. You just get +1/+1 because it's a yes or no question. It's just a condition. So basically, if you have 4 creatures out on the field and you equip this to one of them, it will get a +3/+3 for the other 3. Except for Ayli. That's where Ayli becomes a problem. She is a core cleric, which doesn't really mesh with anything else in the deck as far as I know. Not even a vampire, technically, and definitely not an ally. So you gotta watch out for that one, but she really is worth having in the deck, in my opinion. Next, well, we go to the lands. We're pretty much there already, although I should mention that Stoneforge Masterwork, there are 4 copies of it. Next up, we've got the lands, and if you thought it was stopping there and I was just going to put in some colors and fix the colors, no, we got the life gain land, so every time you gain life, they lose a point, remember that? There you go, Cliffhaven Vampire. Let's throw in Scoured Barrens then. Drop it in, gain 1 life. No problem there, and the speed thing is not a big deal, because usually you can drop that on turn 1, or you could drop it so late that it doesn't matter, because the whole dang deck pretty much costs 2 and 3, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. Next up, we've got Evolving Wilds, which is definitely the poor man's fetch lands, but I just don't see fetch lands being that important. This isn't like an ultra speed combo deck. You've got all day to win with this thing. So Evolving Wilds works just fine. I mean, you don't want to get caught with a fetch land late game when you're at like 10 life and then you drive it down to 9. That's really dangerous. So I would definitely keep the Evolving Wilds in here. It's a double landfall trigger for retreat. And, I don't know, it's been reprinted a billion times, so it's not that hard to find. So for both the Scoured and the Evolving, I put in 4 copies. Next, we've got Shambling Vent, which is completely and utterly optional, because they are kind of expensive. I think they're like $8, something like that. But it does enter the battlefield tapped, but then it taps for both colors. So it's a color fix, but it comes in tapped. But if you pay 3, which is a mix, so it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, it becomes a 2/3 white and black elemental creature with lifelink until end of turn. Remember, it doesn't have haste. And the lifelink is really the key. So if you need to just stall and gain more life, or if, once again, you've got Cliffhaven Vampire on the field and you want to gain little bit of life, we'll say 2 life from the, combat strike, and then you want them to lose another life, there you go. So very optional, it's just not that important, but I put them in there because I had copies. I only put in 2, though, because I didn't want to get too tap-happy. Speaking of tap-happy, though, we've got Sandstone Bridge. Sandstone Bridge enters the battlefield tapped. I forgot how many I actually put in there. I think it's 3, because I kept changing the number. But when Sandstone Bridge enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains vigilance until end of turn. And then it only generates white. I just put it in instead of plains because I'm just not in a hurry with this deck. I'm sitting there just nuking their life total whenever I do anything. And the +1/+1 is really nice, and the vigilance is really nice, especially early game. Plus, you could feel perfectly free to drop this in on turn 1 if you don't have Expedition Envoy, because nothing else costs 1. So not a big problem there, and usually you're not short on white in this deck. Usually you're short on black. And then the rest is basically just swamps and plains. That's it. So I think it was... Boy, I really should have written this down. I think it was down to 4 plains and 6 swamps, or whatever equals 23. And I went with 23 because you do want to drop in quite a bit of land for retreat to Hagra if you get it. And then you also want to make sure that you can fix your colors extremely quickly. You don't want to be, turn 3, turn 4, and not be fixing them. So Evolving Wilds also shrinks your deck. So if you pulled 1 or 2 Evolving Wilds, you're already down to a normal amount of land. So you could drop it a little bit and increase the creatures. I think actually 22 is a more appropriate amount of land. But I did want a certain amount of land that comes in untapped, which would be the traditional swamps and plains. So that's why I went with that total arrangement, because otherwise it would have been shorter, and I'd have to start pulling things that I actually need, like the man land. So the basic strategy of this deck and how you operate it is just like any other basic boring deck. It's sort of like a pre-release, you just get creatures as you pull them, summon them whenever you can, and start hitting them. So this deck definitely has early game aggro and Expedition Envoy, and just a lot of really good quick hitters. It's got a ton of flyers that can swing every single turn, and then a lot of the activated abilities do not rely on the creature being untapped. Actually, none of them do, except for the Ondu War Cleric, which I really strongly recommend you swap out with Makindi. But Zulaport, that's just a passive triggered ability. So he could be swinging, not swinging, whatever, and it's still going to go off. So it's like dual purpose creatures. They start whacking the opponent, they're hitting their life total, eliminating creatures, whatever they got to do. But then there's like spells going off in the background the whole time. So during the upkeep, they lost life, and then because you gain life, they lost more life, and then you dropped into land, so they lost more life as you gain life, and it just all cascades into this ridiculous loss of like 8 life per turn, and there's nothing they can do. I mean, Squelch and Trickbind are not legal right now, so what are they going to do to stop the activated abilities? There just is nothing. There is no solution. If they're running just massive creature removal, that's not really a deck. I mean, it'd have to be pure white, and a lot of the good mass kill spells are gone, and Virulent Plague doesn't affect this deck at all. So it's pretty hard to wipe them out without like a Drown in Sorrows or Bile Blight, or, I mean, I guess Languish, but even then, it's kind of pushing it. I have lost to a green repetitive Great Aurora board wipe, but I mean, most people don't play that white board wipe, so it's just, there's really no common kryptonite to this deck, I guess you would say. It just kind of does what it does, and it's pretty good. I don't think it's absolutely astonishing or amazing, but it's definitely good. And there's a lot of replacement options for Drana. You could just go get any other black ally or any other black creature with a rally effect. There's quite a few options out there for pretty good ones. Or you could just go crazy and put in Captain's Claws instead, because every time the creature swings with it, they drop in an ally token, and there's your automatic rally in the middle of combat. The only problem is the token is tapped and attacking, but you could, once it's tapped and attacking and they block it, sacrifice it with Ayli. So there's so many options in this deck, and it's just a riot to play, and it's dirt cheap to build. At least for now. I really think Ayli's going to go up. And maybe Drana's Emissary, probably not. I think it's a little late for that one. And really, I don't see anything else in the deck that could possibly shoot through the roof, except maybe Stoneforge Masterwork, but that's like, I think it's like 39 cents. So like, how far could that really go up? Scoured Barrens is 50 cents. Sandstone is worthless. And, well, Shambling Vent is completely optional. So you could just replace the 2 Shambling Vents with 1 Plains and 1 Swamp and have almost the exact same deck. So it's not a big detriment to drop out the big money cards. So if you want to go to Friday Night Magic and just play a really fun, easy to operate deck, but that really trains you in remembering triggers and remembering activated abilities, this is the one to do it with. So if you go and demolish everybody at your LGS, let me know in the comment section, because everybody loves stories like that. And I will see you next video.